Okay, so take two.
Okay.
Hi, we're Group 1. I'm Sarah/Lucy Nondorf.
I'm Alicia.
I'm Lauren Payne,
Riley.
and this is Post 3.
Yeah.
Alright, so we are going to talk about Freeman and Freeman, Chapter 1, and I did A and E, but I'm going to start off with A, and so basically I did Eugenia and Farah, and pretty much Eugenia is a 5-year-old girl living in a small community, and she was born in an apartment because her mother is an undocumented person, and she was too afraid to actually go to a hospital and have her there. And so that basically shaped how she grew up living in other people's homes and in close encounters with her family. And basically, she went to a bilingual school, and this helped her because she was able to exercise her Spanish-speaking skills as well as learning English at the same time, and that, and that is beneficial because she wasn't losing her native tongue. And her mother was actually surprised at that that being in a bilingual school actually helped her become, I guess, more proficient in schools. And so basically, my question for this section was, how do we get away from that fear and mistrust of being undocumented in the United States, and how can we work toward having a safer community?
Especially because a lot of them don't realize that, especially with doctors and things of that nature, it's the doctor-patient confidentiality, and you can't get deported for going and getting taken care of.
Right. I feel like it's interesting because Eugenia, most of the students were relatively older, and she's only 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting that she started out bilingual in a bilingual school, rather than having to come in later.
I'll be talking a little bit more on that with my guy too.
Okay, I feel like that's really interesting. But to answer your question, I think it's this fear that's like ingrained because you're not technically supposed to be here, but at the same time you just want what's best for your children. And so it's like those videos that were posted within session 3, they talked a lot about the undocumented students in high school trying to get into college, and they couldn't afford it because, they can't get financial aid because their parents aren't paying taxes and they're not documented, so they are afraid of filing for it for fear of getting deported. And so I feel like it's this big double-edged sword. Do we allow these students to get financial aid and kind of decrease this fear that undocumented people have, but then at the same time that will increase the amount of migrations into the U.S. illegally. And so it's kind of how do we combat both of those at the same time?
What that really makes me think of is, so let's say, so Eugenia was born in the United States. Does that really make her undocumented because she's American?
At that point. But she grew up in that mindset from her mom and from her family.
And should she be treated like someone who's...
No, she shouldn't.
She shouldn't,
but there is that stigmatism against it.
And there was a person, I forget which one, but wasn't there a person who was born in the United States and then their parents got a citizenship? Not citizenship, but they're allowed to stay because of some labor, if they agreed to work for a labor, a farm.
I know if you get you can get your green card in several different ways, and one of them is through a work visa to start with, and then if you are a proficient worker, it's something where it's the laborer green card versus the green card when you marry in or when you get your citizenship sort of a thing. There's lots of loopholes, and it's just unfortunate that it's not an easier system to navigate, to figure out either yes or no kind of a thing.
It's a lot of money.
Okay, and so Farah, the next person in my section, she's a 9-year-old girl who came to the United States from Iraq with her brother and her parents, and basically she is facing racism, discrimination for being Muslim, and her family, though they speak English very well, they're having trouble finding jobs that kind of match their skill set.
Well,
So
and they're in Dallas,
they're in
Texas. They
Texas.
should move somewhere else. It doesn't get much more discriminatory than Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
Sorry if anyone's from Texas.
Yeah, so basically, I feel like the hardest part about her, experience in the American education school system is that she is so aware of what's going on, and she's only 9 years old. And so that's what really was like, wow, she understands that her family's in financial need, and she experienced watched violence happen in Iraq, and she's oh gosh, there's racism. She knows it happens, and she knows that other Muslims and just other people in general experience that, and being 9 years old is
she's very much wise beyond her years.
Yes.
Had to grow up real fast. Which I feel is very similar for probably, I can't survey every single immigrant family, but that's probably similar to every child, almost every child, or at least one child from every family that has immigrated. For that feeling.
I think there's the weird balance of you want to, I guess the article that we read, where was it? The R&M article that we read later kind of addresses teaching students reality versus this idealized thing.
The sheltered kind of.
Yeah, that most schools try to ingrain. And so I feel like there's this interesting balance that you have to find with, especially students who have been through a lot, is acknowledging that this, bad reality exists, but kind of trying to teach them in another way so that it's not the most important thing. I feel like for her right now, it's probably the most important thing. All of the things that she's witnessed and all the things that she's experienced are hindering her education rather than enhancing
them.
And so I feel like her teacher needs to be able to flip that on its head and kind of use it as a tool. In the classroom rather than a hindrance.
That kind of goes in with my question with she speaks Arabic.
Okay.
And the teacher doesn't speak Arabic, and so she pretty much only speaks Arabic and only talks with some of the other Muslim girls at school. And my question is, how do we really reach those students and help improve their education if we don't speak their native tongue? I feel like there's such a huge disconnect because that's such a huge part of her culture, and she realizes that she's not clicking as well as her brother in school because she was already really fluent in Arabic and just doesn't.
Right.
She's not.
Her brother could assimilate much quicker
Because he was younger.
Yeah. My personal experience, I told you guys a little bit more about this, but my sister stayed in Korea the longest, and so she, still speaks Korean, and she's only into Korean music, only into Korean guys, and then as we're going younger, my brother can't read or write, he, he still is comfortable with Asians, but he's really assimilated to American ways, and he knows nothing about our culture. But yeah, I completely agree. If you come here at a younger age, it's so much easier to assimilate because it's kind of easy to overlook the problems because they're so young, they don't know about it anyways. She's, how old is she here?
She's 9.
She's 9, but she was still forced to grow up so much quicker. And at a younger age, you don't notice those things because you're still young and you don't have those developing skills. And yeah, but I can relate to that. And I'm just the middle ground. I'm I have a foot there, and I don't know. But yeah.
Were you all born in Korea?
Yeah.
Your brother? He was just an infant when you guys came over?
Well, my brother and my sister and I are all 2 years apart, so he's started preschool here. Well, I started first grade here, so yeah, he was a baby. He was 4. Yeah, he was 2 years younger than 6, yeah. Yeah, he was 4, so he was really young, and but it's like tough, and I think my sister had the most responsibility, like how Farah noticed that her family was financially unstable and stuff. Like that fell a lot on my sister, and that's the reason why, you know, she is doing the major that she essentially knows that she hates because she wants to support my family.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for me, like, it never was like pressed on me, and I don't know. And we did like have to do the whole like green card and that stuff, and I didn't even know about it until like after, and they didn't even bother to tell me. It was just all on my sister. And so yeah, I understand where Farah is coming from, because when I read about her, she reminded me a lot of my sister, because my sister really carries a lot of the responsibilities in her family.
I feel like the oldest child always has that, and then to have that also added pressure of actually understanding the differences, still really wanting to be connected to your culture, and then trying to figure out this new culture, that trying to figure out how and where you fit in is another thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that also another, it's a big thing in the Korean culture of the oldest kind of taking care of the family as well?
Yeah, it's just like a big Asian thing where, you know, it's like, you know, the stereotype of Asians, you know, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, you know, it's not because of like, because they think we're smart, it's because of the money that you're gonna make. It's the,
you can,
you know,
financially take care of your family.
financially. But the thing is, like, it's also, family is so big in Asian culture, you want to do that anyways. So, but yeah, my sister, you know, she saves her money to send my parents to the doctor and stuff, but yeah, that is really big. Like, the first child pretty much tends to carry a lot of the responsibilities, and
that's a lot of weight on this poor little 9-year-old
I
child.
know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Plus that, and having to enter into, like you said, a new culture, and having to not only try to make yourself, like, still yourself in that culture, but have to learn in that culture. Like, you know, you're learning in English rather than Arabic, because our teacher obviously doesn't speak Arabic. Like, how many Americans speak Arabic?
Not
Very few.
Yeah.
And so it's this big issue that I feel like she's having is, you know, how do you keep in touch with your culture while assimilating at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, how do you do that? It's not possible.
I mean, I don't want to go into it because we'll go into it later, but there's quite a few other anecdotes that definitely talk about having that balance and being able to do what you need to do in order to be successful. And if that means people are making fun of you, they're like, I don't care. School's more important. My culture and my heritage is more important than what other people say.
Yeah.
It's important to who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And I respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely going back to your question about how you can, like, fill in that gap between a teacher who doesn't know how to speak. I don't know. I just feel like just show. I mean, it's pretty, I feel like emotions and, like, body language is pretty universal.
Yeah.
It's huge,
Yeah. So, you know, I feel like that's a huge step that teachers can take in, you know, I don't know. Like, I just feel like reading this, it was all these questions about what specific tools should we use, like what should we do with the child in this
But
situation.
there's something that everyone can do, and that's just use your empathy and just show compassion towards this kid that's obviously struggling, and you're obviously frustrated because you can't communicate it with them as well as you'd like to, but just to show them that you care, even a minuscule amount, is huge for that child. So why not just go that one extra step for yourself? And it could be leaps and bounds for this child.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why people can't do that more often. I don't get why that's such a hard concept to grasp.
Well, that should be ingrained in every educator's brain.
Yeah, exactly. It should be being the operative word there. Should.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are all in agreement in there, and we were like, yeah, gung ho, we're totally going to be that teacher. And then you get those that have been there for 30, 40 years, and they're so burnt out that, okay, it's time for you to leave and let the ones that are ready to be gung ho to go on in and
I also feel
reins.
like there's so many aspects to teaching, like, oh, you have to include all choose students, and like I was talking with my teaching academy teacher, and he, you know, knew that I was a student that I was on top of my grades and was kind of quiet, but like participated in class well enough to get a good grade and stuff. He was like, but how do you still, you know, give that student that was doing good in school like equal attention as the kids who have like IEPs and need extra attention? Like, there's just so many things that teachers have to do. It's just, I feel like I can understand with teachers who, you know, like tend to not like want to take that extra step because they have so many.
It's just
other
one
things.
extra thing to do that
Yeah.
you're already juggling a cajillion things.
Yeah,
to
and
begin
I
with,
think
yeah.
it's important, like, I think that's why this program is so, you know, crucial for us, because it builds that empathy. Like, reading this, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember feeling like that. Like, especially if you read through a lot of these, then they, you know, especially the Hispanic and, like, the Latino students, they succeeded a lot better if their, like, teachers were the same ethnicity. And, like, yeah.
That's something I talk about later.
Yeah.
All right. I think we should keep going.
Yeah. But those are some good questions.
I can do mine next. My question is actually very similar to yours.
Okay.
So I'll just talk about mine. So I had Sharma, who is a Punjabi student, and I did not know this, but Punjabi is, it's in India, like the region of India, and they speak Punjabi. I did not know that. I had to look it up.
I know, me too.
I did not know. Anyway,
There's
so
a lot of Punjabi speakers in Canada, especially in Vancouver.
interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
They all went into Abercrombie.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
My family's Canadian, so I go through all the time
Oh.
to talk about it.
Yeah, so these guys had been moving back and forth from India to America because her parents really, really wanted her to be in a situation where she could learn better than she could in her current situation in India. So they brought her to America. Her family found jobs in this small rural farming community. Where? I don't remember where. And so she and her family are living here, but I feel like the difference between her and a lot of the other students that this book talks about was the involvement of her parental unit within her schooling. So like on the first day she came, and her mother actually took her teacher aside and said, hey, here's what's going on. I would like her to receive, you know, any sort of extra attention. Do you have a Punjabi, you know, ELL translator? Do you have this? You know, I'm really concerned. I really want her to succeed, etc., etc. And so I feel like that's something that really kind of benefited her in the long run, was this support that she got from home. But what actually happened was Sharma was really able to assimilate into American culture, and this reminds me of your little brother when you said that. She wouldn't acknowledge any of the other Punjabi students at the school. She wanted to be with the white students, the Caucasians, because that's what she thought she was trying to do, was assimilate. And so she got really good at speaking English, like colloquially, and she could do the same like colloquialisms and like all those
And
things.
inflections and stuff.
Yeah, the same things that native speakers do. She got to kind of that level because she spent so much time with native English speakers. And so it did help her. She had some trouble a little bit with reading and writing, but she was really good at it. So she was kind of a success story, which was really fun to learn about. But I had so my question was similar, like, this school, or this school district, I guess, happened to have a Punjabi expert.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Just hands.
It just happened to have one.
Yeah.
Like, what if parents request this sort of language assistance and the school does not have that language specialist? Like, most schools will have Spanish. Most schools in this area will have, like, Chinese or Japanese. But I feel like a lot of places will not have Punjabi.
You can go first.
So, I agree that a lot of places will definitely have Spanish, but it made me think of when I was lost in Spain, and I speak a lick of none whatsoever of Spanish, other than like, where's the bathroom and hi, my name is, and I ended up getting really, really lost and just going into this store, and this sweet old grandma was trying to help me, could tell that I was definitely like not happy, because I'm like bawling my eyes out trying to figure out where I am, and she tried to speak with me. We just couldn't do that because there was definitely a language barrier, and she just did the whole uno momento and then walked back and then came back out with a probably 4-year-old great-grandchild of hers or grandchild of hers, and he had broken English, but it was enough that we could figure out how to get me home. I feel like if there is family at home, it not only would bring the family in so that it's the community of the family and the school working together, but then you could get everyone involved, and then there would be, I mean, it would be broken English and broken whatever, but you could still possibly at least get communication across, which I think would be the easiest, cheapest way of going about it. But then there goes the whole thing of if that family doesn't have anybody that speaks any English at all, so then you fall into that problem.
I really like that, having that support system and involving the parents, because that's what I've been reading in special ed too, is really involving the parents and making them, you know, assuring them that
Making
you
the
can
family a part of everything.
exactly
Yeah.
making the family a part of things and having that support for the student.
Creates a better foundation for the student academically and just
Mhm.
in general in life for the rest of their life.
Which really goes into a lot of those students who do not have parents who can handle them. They're too I guess they're a little difficult in the classroom, or parents aren't even there, or they just don't know what to do, or they're too busy assimilating, and
Right.
so yeah, definitely that support system.
A good movie to watch that's along this line is one of America Ferrera's very first movies that she did, and it's called Real Women Have Curves. And it's very interesting because it has the mom is very much traditionally into their culture and all this stuff, and America Ferrera is a very bright young Hispanic woman, and she's trying to assimilate into the culture and kind of almost shunning her family, but she has a really strong connection with her grandfather that came up, so it's really cool family dynamic to watch, and it's a good coming of age story. It was a good feel good, but definitely had some like intense moments, and so it was very like literally I'm watching this family going through this kind of a thing. It wasn't so like Full House moment kind of stuff happening.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm saying there. But yeah, that's a really good one, which I think feels like it goes along with whatever, like all of this stuff that we're talking about, and how the teacher in that one was a Hispanic teacher, and he saw something in her and wanted her to help her get into college. And so it's just this really cool, like, if there's just that one person that has faith in you, even if you have everything else going against you, you can do it. It can
make the
happen.
difference.
It can totally make the difference.
Going back to your question, like, about how her parents, believe that adopting Western ways was necessary for Sharma to succeed, like, it makes me wonder if all the parents in this book, like, thought that, then would their results have been any different,
Yeah.
Because, like, you can give support, like, but I'm just curious to see what difference it would make if, parents kind of were for the students kind of assimilating to Western ways.
I feel like some parents were, but it's like, to what extent? I feel like, it was good she had a good support system. Sharma, had a good support system, but at the same time, she's like, you need to be successful in American society, even though you're so new to it. And that's putting so much pressure on her to do so well, even though it's not, like, entirely, it's not commonplace for her. So, like, challenging, I think, is good, and helping her maintain, her native background is good, but it's like, to what extent is it pushing? Because there's that, we're pushing so hard for people to be American that they're losing themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, that, where's that balance?
I think that you just quoted me almost exactly. I was like, be Americanized. No, it's fine. I will go back to it. But that's something exactly what I said later on in one, I think it was like number 3. I had to talk about something like that. But yeah.
We can go to number 3 after we talk about
So I had 2 kiddos, and my first one was Salvador, and his parents are originally from Mexico. It doesn't quite say if he was born in Mexico or if he was born in California, but it starts off with him in 3rd grade with his teacher Anne, and it's a bilingual kindergarten. He started in a bilingual kindergarten, and it's a bilingual elementary school until 4th grade, when it reverts to all English.
Okay, so the mainstream one.
So the mainstream of once 4th grade happens, but up until then, it's the bilingual Spanish English, and it happened to be a multi-age too, so it was a 2nd, 3rd split.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think that right there was really helpful for him, because he didn't do well in his other 2nd grade class. And the other teachers, like all of his teachers prior to Anne, this 2nd, 3rd grade split teacher, kind of just wrote him off as a miscreant and just he's hopeless, can't help him. Because he would have outbursts, he would start fights all the time with anyone, everywhere, and would just, his tantrums included just screaming and crying, just for really no reason, just for attention, but as far as anyone on the outside just looked like for no reason. Why are you crying? What are you doing?
Yeah.
But he refused. what I found interesting is that he not only refused to read or write in English, but he also refused to read or write in Spanish.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I found that really interesting.
That's because I think he was born in the United States, if I recall, and he was at such a young age that he was put right into American.
Because he started in kindergarten in the States, but I
Yeah.
don't know if he was born in the States or not.
Oh, well, he started at such a young age that he wasn't super fluent in Spanish, and then he still wasn't super, fluent in English, and so he's at that weird place where he's in the middle,
Yeah.
and so they're like, oh, do this, but he doesn't know it in English, and he's not,
Fluent enough
because
in
he's so young in
Spanish.
Spanish, so he's at this.
Yeah. And then, so his mom really wanted to help him out, and she only had up to a high school education through Mexican schooling, and then was attending English classes so she could assimilate better and just so that she could get a job in the States. His father, however, had a job, but he was rarely home. He was always somewhere else in the state or in Mexico, and it became very apparent that even if you were not told Dad was home, you knew Dad was home because of how the child behaved. He behaved much differently.
Okay.
So at the end of their thing with him, they figured out that there more than likely was some sort of violence or abuse happening when Dad was home, but they had insufficient
Okay.
evidence against it, so nothing could really happen on that one, unfortunately. But Anne worked really hard with him, like very diligently, made sure that the classroom set up and that the lesson plans were very consistent throughout the entire year. And she saw very small changes in a positive manner for him by the end of the year. And then when he went to the next grade, the fourth grade teacher was Francisco, a male Latino, and they saw a huge difference by the end of it. And obviously a lot of that had to do with the fact that Francisco was a male Latino.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, here's a role model that's doing very well, it's successful, and is making this work. And like, maybe I can do that too. And he would go out and play soccer with all the kids during recess. And like, he made it a point to make a community in his class, I felt. And he did a really good job of, his classroom and everything was set up very similarly to Anne's, so it was very easy for Salvador to come in and already kind of know the routine and what was expected of him. Yeah, that consistency. I think that's key, to keep it within the school, to talk to the next level, especially for those kids that are struggling, to go ahead and go talk to their next level teacher and be like, so this is what we did with them. You can try it. You can try something different, but it worked really well, so you might want it, or, just that communication that people tend to forget about. Yeah, which is funny because we're humans and we like to hear ourselves talk, so why don't we go talk to other people? But for me, let me just scroll down to where my question is. I can't remember offhand here. For that one, my question was why. I found it fascinating that it was a bilingual school, and that he ended up being rather successful for his age group. I mean, and all that. He went from being not at all to okay to being at his grade level, that's a huge step. So my thing is, why don't we just go ahead and teach other languages, multiple languages, in the elementary age level? Because that's when the kids can absorb it better. Trying to teach it at an older age, it doesn't compute as well, and then it sets them up for life to be able to converse with other people, to be able to be that link for those new people coming in, kind of a thing. Because there's always going to be immigrants coming in. That's just the fact of life. People are always going to be moving and trying to better themselves. That's human nature. So eventually, if these kids get that bilingual, then they could be those teachers that will be able to just go sit down with those parents and be like, hey, I know exactly what you're going through, or hey, I can actually have a conversation with you. Let's figure out how to make your kid successful. So why don't we start that? I just don't understand why it's not implemented.
Yeah.
I think that was in the R&M article about
Yeah,
how do we
it
get
was.
more students to become teachers, or students to
because
The
it talked a
ELL.
lot
Yeah.
about how this ever-growing diversity of students is being taught predominantly by white
Middle class females.
And it's like, I am that.
You don't get much whiter than me, obviously, but it's
Like,
true
but at the
though.
same time, like, I mean, while I feel like I can still connect with students and be a good teacher, like, at the same time, I do agree that there is this missing disconnect between myself and, say, a native Honduran who speaks only Spanish. Like, there's only so much that I can connect with them, and I mean, I will try my hardest to be the teacher that they need me to be, but I think it's important that we switch it so that we're encouraging more students to become teachers. Because I feel like, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like when we see the success of ELL students or those migrant students who come in and they do really well, everybody is like, oh my gosh, you should be a doctor, you should be an engineer, you should really make something of
Go
yourself.
be an astronaut.
Go be an astronaut because you can.
Which is great. That's a good thing
Yeah,
to
no,
do.
it's
But
great
we need
goals.
teachers that are really good too.
But yeah, like teachers, I feel like this profession is often belittled.
All the time, not
Yes.
even
Yeah.
often. It is
That-
belittled.
that
If you can't do anything, teach. Well,
Yeah, no. That brings
I
me
hate
back
that
to
phrase.
that brings me back to our 310 discussion, where when I tell my friends that I'm a teacher, like these are like acquaintances, they're like, oh, that's awesome, like they never say, oh my gosh, you're gonna be so successful.
Yeah,
Like, there's just
like,
that
oh,
like
you'll be great.
that
Yeah.
tiny like change in language, you like don't notice it.
That inflection
But, like,
almost, yeah.
But people, my friends like, what are you, Deb? Like, oh my, that's so like cool. I have so much respect.
Yeah. There's no way I can do that. I respect you so much
Yeah,
to be able to do that.
It's like, okay.
Thanks. I just happen to be really good with kids. You happen to be really good at dealing with blood. I don't like blood, so I'm not going to
And
be a
it's
doctor.
But that's my point. It's like when you do have those really smart, really successful students, and especially when they are of minority, people often encourage them to reach the highest, quote unquote, highest potential within society, and that is never a teacher. And so those students are never found into teacher programs.
Preach.
And this
Preach
is why
it.
we only have white middle class female teachers, is because everybody else who is seen,
It's expected of them,
yeah, because
almost.
it's expected, and then that's what it has been historically, and we don't encourage teaching like we should.
In my elementary school, we had 2 male teachers. Both of them were white male teachers, but we only had 2. My 4th grade teacher and then our PE teacher was male.
Yeah, no, up until
Granted, this is in the
Middle
early
school.
90s, but still.
yeah, up until middle school, I had never had a male teacher before.
Yeah, my first male teacher was, besides PE teacher, was my 4th grade teacher, but it was a 4th-5th split.
So like I think, cause like, and then you have this disconnect again, which brings it back to why don't we teach bilingual always, forever? Like, why don't we teach Spanish in schools plus another language? Why don't we teach Chinese? Why don't we teach
What was
Korean?
it?
Why don't we teach?
What was it? In 432, we were talking about how there was that
It was
one.
431.
It was 4. Yeah, where it was it was the trilingual thing where
Yeah.
you were taught your native tongue, you were taught English, and you got to choose your other one that you wanted to learn.
Oh, wasn't
Or you were taught like whatever your neighboring
that was
countries
was
are.
in India where
Yeah.
they
It was India and it was in Luxembourg.
in Luxembourg.
That's right. I thought that's the smartest idea. Why don't we adopt that idea? It's
Because the United States is so monolinguistic.
it's so anti anyone that's not me.
Which is funny because
I'm not saying me, but I mean like
Yeah,
they're all
United
Americans
States.
are all